Hey, what's up, everybody? Cheyenne Perry here with the Lean In podcast, where everyone has a story to tell. It's time to lean in, listen, and learn from the stories that are shared. Let's get it.
What's up, everybody? It's Brian Perry here with the Lean In Podcast, episode number 10. So today I have a wonderful guest, a great friend of mine, Jonathon Hudson. Mr. Hudson, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing good, man. Yeah, thanks for hopping on the podcast. Thank you. Can you share with us, listeners, viewers, who you
Thanks
are,
for having me.
where you from?
Yeah, so I'm Jonathon Hudson. I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Cheyenne and I grew up in a couple of sister churches here in Fort Wayne. I still am pretty active with the one I went to growing up. It's called Parkwood Church of God. I'm currently serving at another church in South Bend, though. That's my passion in ministry is music and youth. And so that's just kind of what I do. My daytime job right now, though, I work at a place called the Lighthouse. It's a men's addiction recovery center based on the Bible. And that pretty much sums it up. I'm a husband and father of two sons.
Right. And a man who loves Detroit, I see.
Oh, yes. Detroit sports all the way, except for the Pistons.
Yeah. Well, they'll be in the playoffs this year, hopefully. So we'll see. Yeah, it's exciting. Jonathan, we go back years now, and really cool to see how life has kind of, really been good to us, the Lord being. And talk to us a little bit about your job, Lighthouse. How'd you get into that realm, and what does that look like for you working every day there?
Yeah. So it's in most addiction facilities, you have what's called a case manager, the government ran ones. This one being not just biblically motivated, but biblically based, and everything centered around that. They call us care managers, the position that I'm in. I'm basically working every day with men who have went through the worst of the worst in addictions, and they're looking to be brought up out of that. And we believe the only solution for that, for the issue of sin in our lives, which is what we also believe addiction either is or comes out of. I'm kind of using the less harsh language for now, but we believe that the solution for that is Jesus. And so I teach, on my shift, I teach 3 Bible classes to the men throughout the day. I help them with whatever their needs are in between those classes. I just work, as Paul would say it, I live life amongst these guys for their sake. It's a real blessing and a real honor to get to be part of that and watch how God works in some of these guys' lives and calls them up to, honestly, some new and great things for them.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah. What would we say are some challenges within the workplace at the Lighthouse?
The big ones, though, for me personally, you've always known this about me. The word I would use here would be pretty empathic. I really feel for people around me. I really connect with the people that I'm around quite a bit. Even if I don't know them that well, if I see someone walk in a room mad, it can kind of start to make me a little like, yeah. So, it's those days where we have guys who have been doing really well for a long time, and devil gets a hold of their lives, creeps back in. We recently had, I can't say too much of this, we have certain confidentiality clauses, but we recently had a guy who I felt, really like a brother with over a course of a couple years, and things kind of went sour for him. There's some hurt involved in that. It's some of that, the same as a pastor for a church, when someone at their church leaves or has something cause them to walk away. There's some serious heartbreak there, and it can be difficult to walk through. God, fortunately, he reminds us that we're not the Savior at the end of the day, that we are not amateur saviors either. We are vessels, and he reminds us that, his will is going to be done in their lives one way and in our lives, and that and he helps find peace in it.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, kudos to you for being in the trenches and working with guys who are battling those types of things there. Man, what an encouragement to see. Sure, you guys and other agencies around are doing the same thing, really trying to help people and bring hope to people's lives. So that's awesome. Yeah. Do you see yourself becoming a pastor one day, or talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question this way, and I'm sorry, you know me, but I'm always more long-winded than not. So, but for me right now, this isn't really a simple answer. Right now, I'm kind of in a phase of life, in a phase of my ministries and callings that right now I'm just kind of trusting wherever he leads, short term, long term, all of it. He at the time, I spent a long time fighting the call to seminary. And about a few years ago, I finally submitted to that call. No longer than I did that, I happened to, me and my job at the time parted ways, and it was almost as if God was nudging me saying, all right, hey, now focus on this. All right, you finally get it, now focus on it. So he blessed me. Lighthouse almost quite literally fell into my lap at that time. I don't believe in coincidence though, so that's why I say he blessed me with that job. It works very well with my seminary schedule. It has helped develop parts of my personal ministry that had never been developed before, to be honest, in my walk. And so I do feel whether it's long term or short term there, it has been God's will. He's using it for whatever the next steps are. Right now, I do feel a strong pull in terms of the long term to church ministry. I still, you and me know, we hear people say this a million times. I'm not going to be a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. And usually the people that swear by that usually end up being pastors. I still don't believe that's the case here for me. I still believe I'm not really called to be a lead pastor, but I have that associate role is where I've seemed to be called lately. So if, I guess to answer your question there, put all that together, if God calls me to a full-time role in a church and it's something that I know is a calling, and, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to say yes. Otherwise, right now, I'm serving in part-time roles. While I was still at Parkwood serving there, I was a part-time worship leader. The church I'm at right now, I'm part-time worship leader. Now, the pastor will, between me and him, he will say, well, you're associate pastor. I fill in, I do his pulpit fill when he's gone, but it's all part-time. If God calls me to a full-time role somewhere, I'll probably be answering that. I would hope I do answer that, really, if I'm putting it that way.
Right.
Otherwise, if not, I'll probably, if there isn't a calling full-time to a church, I'll probably be at Lighthouse until that day comes, because it works so well with the seminary calling at hand right now. And I don't want to miss that step that God has given. Right.
Right. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your music background. Man, you are such a gifted guitar player. You could probably play a million instruments. Yeah. How did that happen? You just having a love and passion for music.
Yeah. I grew up, my dad basically led the worship at Parkwood growing up. I grew up with at a young age, had a pretty natural singing voice. It didn't really have to be worked on or developed. At like 5 years old, I got up in front of the church and sang away in a manger, and it came out, the notes were what they should be, right? And there was really no training or practice involved. It was just, and so through that, I enjoyed singing. My parents noticed when I was younger that they thought I had a pretty natural catch for rhythm. And so they tried to get me into instruments. They started with a violin. They tried piano. I kind of stuck with piano. I can play piano decent. But the first instrument that stuck that they put me in was drums. I played that through middle school, early high school, but in early high school, I got introduced to my first guitar, and that was a whole different ballgame for me. I fell in love with that. And around that time is actually at the church camp we both went to, when I had really had what I would call my first personal, most of my life I spent coattailing my parents and my church's faith, right? And that's not their fault. I'm not blaming them. That's, God's timing is what I would put there. But around that time was when I had what I would call my first personal encounter with Christ coming into my life. And it's just interesting that's where in my personal time outside of church or outside of church camp, when I would go back home, that's where I got deepest into developing that relationship with him, was through song, learning Jeremy Camp songs in my bedroom with my guitar. And I just loved it. Yeah, I was a huge Jeremy Camp nut. But through that, I kept learning. I fell in love further and further with music. I became the worship leader eventually. I learned bass, ukulele, mandolin, stringed instruments is kind of where I stuck after guitar. When I met my wife, I like to say made me, but it was voluntarily. But she made me join a flute class, and I learned the basics of flute. So there's about 8 or 9 instruments that I can play the basics on, if not more than the basics. And currently, like I said earlier, serving as the worship leader at the church I'm at. There, I play guitar and sing. That's pretty much all I do. I'll break out the mandolin every now and then. You and I once had a band together in college called Heart of Fire. What do we do about 6 songs? Is that what we did of our own?
Yep, 5 or 6 songs.
Yeah, I think so. And then in the recent years, we're not still a band at the moment. I said at the moment on purpose. I'm working on them. But in recent years, I had another band called Crimson Letters.
Okay.
And we recorded about 13, 14 songs. 3 or 4 haven't released yet, but the album that had 10 songs is still out there called Hope for Tomorrow. But yeah, I'll end my long-windedness with this comment to that question. I keep telling people no matter what ministry, what type of ministry I'm called to, one thing I know is that God has blessed me with the gift of music. And I believe in giving back to God of what he has given to us. So I will probably my entire life be at least involved in some form of music ministry along with whatever ministry I'm in. Yeah, that's just, it's not going to happen otherwise.
Right. Yeah, man. We'll have to touch on that later on the Heart of Fire. But I'm curious because you're such an individual. You wrote a lot of songs in the past and probably have more in the queue. What's that process like? Writing songs.
So I got some bad news for you, and I might be underselling myself, but back when you and I were in the band, I was writing, it felt like a song a week, right? These days, it's kind of more like a song a year. And again, I might be underselling myself, but it could just be the time. I don't have as much time as I did back then. I don't know, but it has that faucet has turned from a torrent to a trickle, But that being said, God is still blessing in that area. I am still writing. I've got a few songs. Yes, you were correct in the queue. With not having a band at the moment, I am talking to a few people about trying to do some solo recording. One of those songs, they're all more mellow compared to most of my past songs, Heart of Fire, Crimson Letters. You listen to both those bands, you're going to hear a pretty upbeat kind of almost like a fun, yes, they're Christian themed. The lyrics are glorifying to God, but they're that more fun. Whereas these songs get a little more serious, a little more emotional. One was written, it's called In His Arms, about, and I'm mentioning these songs, these newest ones, to kind of walk through the process. I'm going to use those as the examples. In His Arms was kind of written during that COVID time where a lot of people were losing loved ones, whether it be to COVID or to other things. And that song, I just felt that pull for those people in my heart. Those people who were believers themselves and their loved ones were believers. And that makes it sound a little exclusive. It is. It's one of those songs that I wrote that is exclusively for a believer in Christ. And it's just reminding us that if us and that loved one are in Christ, that it's not over. Our bond isn't broken. In fact, it's really on one side of it just begun to be made new. That person is in heaven, and when we get there, that bond is going to be made perfect. What once was such a strong bond here, it's not over. It's just gotten stronger on one side, and we're on our way there, And so that really just looked like walking through those emotions, really. Walking through not just emotions, though, but biblically. Through a biblical lens, kind of observing what Scripture says about loss, about pain, about those hurts. And then the other one, again, kind of, it's a heavy one again. Lift Your Eyes is what it's called. Basically, I was online one night, but I stumbled across a video of a man who live streamed his suicide. And as he did that, he walked through everything going through his head, everything that led him. Like, you watched him walk emotionally up to that point in the video with the things he was saying. And I had written a long time ago, this chorus says, "Lift your eyes and see the beauty of this pain inside, and know that I will always lead you through the darkest night. Once it's over, you will see just how strong you were made to be." And then there's 3 different versions of the chorus. The second chorus is just how brave you were made to be. The last chorus says just how loved you will always be. And it's God speaking to the individual. I had written that chorus years ago, and I had never come up with the words for the verses. And so that night, it was about 2022, 23, that I was sitting down late at night, and I saw that video, and all of a sudden the words just flooded. It was like just flooding out onto the page in between those choruses. And I do believe it's when the songs happen like that, even the songs that don't happen like that, but especially the songs that happen like that, I do full-heartedly believe that it's a godsend.
Right.
I am the pen. This is him giving the words. So, and I can't really explain it, the process for songs like that one any way other than that. It's a godsend. He saw who he wanted to reach with the song, and he poured it out onto my heart. And yeah, that song is kind of actually one of my babies these days that I really hope to get out there sooner than later.
Yeah, that's good, man. I appreciate you being real and honest about those songs that can inspire anyone, really. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So you're still looking for some bandmates, I hear?
Yes and no. It's kind of like with Crimson Letters. If we kick it in gear within the next, 2 to 3 years, probably not. Or if I just decide to go solo, probably not. But it's one of those deals that if God puts something together, hey, let's do it. Whether it's in the meantime as a filler or as the next project. So I'm trying, with the way I'm answering that question, I'm trying to be careful. I'm not really pushing those guys off to the side yet. We're still good friends. Most of us still have some intention to do music together. It's just timing and busyness of life. Yeah. So, let's see, what was the song that I was really gung-ho on? When the Victory is Won. I was playing that one everywhere, and I had a couple other songs that I had written. Who came into the picture first? It might have been. I might have asked you first. Yeah, Matt and Mike. Yeah. So it might have been, I'm pretty sure, because I knew you were a drummer. I didn't know at first that Will was a drummer. And I think Mike was one of the last ones to join. So I'm pretty sure I had asked you first, hey, you want to do this? Because Matt at the time would even tell you he wasn't full blown a believer. So I was kind of, now he did eventually, I'm a believer, but at the time he wasn't sure. So I remember, man, I asked you first at camp, right? Didn't I approach you at camp? One of our last days of camp that year. We weren't campers, but we had worked there that year. And okay, so then I probably asked Amber at the same time then. You and Amber, and then Matt came on in. I think we got going and we started, I think we hadn't really done any recording yet. I think we had only done stuff for a couple months, but I had met Will at camp and he was getting involved in this static thing that you and I were doing. And so we had added him on, and then Mike Balo came and joined in on bass for us. He was going to church at Parkwood. So it was you and Amber and Will at camp, Matt from school and Mike from Parkwood. And we all just got together and started playing. One of the big things, as you know, we started playing for was the static ministry you and I, and you mean Amber and her sister were doing. I think that's how it all started. I knew I was looking for a band. That period of my life was probably one of the most intentional. I'm going out of my way to build up a band. Crimson Letters, it was intentional, but kind of we all fell into each other basically. Crimson Letters, our Heart of Fire, I was like, all right, I'm starting a band, and you want to do it? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. I always tell people for both my bands, and I do believe this, both my bands, Heart of Fire and Crimson Letters, God blessed me with some of the best musicians that I personally knew. So, it's, it's nothing that I alone was able to do. It's something that we all, we did it together. So.
Yeah, man, thank you. Now let's talk about your role as a husband and father. Talk to us about how did you and Dana meet and your challenges you face today as a parent.
Yeah. So including the husband aspect, I'll just start, it was kind of, I don't know if you ever knew this, Shy Guy. I might have told you in passing once or twice before, but not long after heart of fire stopped, is the way I'll word that. I had gotten into some serious, let's call it a falling away. I still believed in God, but I was kind of in a period of rebellion in my life where I got into some serious drinking, but not long after, and then God kind of, knocked me on the head, called me up out of that. And not long after I started walking away from that is when I ended up meeting my now wife, Dana, as I was getting involved at the campus ministry at IPFW and the InterVarsity at IPFW, Christian organizations there, which were awesome. And it's funny, the reason I'm starting with the husband-wife aspect first is because you were asking me questions about music and what I do, where I've served in all those roles. I was looking to build a worship team at the church. And I really didn't have anybody at the time on the worship team. And I had asked at these Christian organizations, hey, any kids who have done worship and you're away from your home church here at college and you're looking for a church to be part of a worship team, we'd love to have you. Right. And she was one of like 4 who stepped up and had interest, one of like 2 who showed up to the first meeting, and then she stuck it out. And through that, now we ended up really drawing close to each other. But see, we ended up getting married in 2016. Took about 2 years. We had our first son, Benjamin, in 2018, and he is my clone in every way. Personality, looks, behavior. I mean, it's just, it's kind of ridiculous. I'm a little scared of it, to be honest. Please don't be 100% me, like, especially in those high school, college years. I'll keep this kind of shorter, but I'll mention there was a little bit of struggle for us with the second one. We wanted them to be closer together in age, to be honest. We found out my wife had a condition that made it not impossible, but harder. So it ended up being another 5 years, but almost literally 5 years and 2 days later, their birthdays 2 days apart, we had our next son, Levi. They are both respectively today 6 and 1 year old. It's, I don't want to sound like a wimp compared to other people who have had like 5 or 6 kids, but like, man, it's a lot, but it's worth it. Yeah, I guess I was just going to say the biggest challenge for me that I face right now as a father, to answer one of the first questions that you asked on this, is being careful as someone in ministry. And the reason I'm saying this is because I'm going through learning this process myself, having not heeded these warnings before. And so I give this as a heed to anyone else in ministry, especially if you're a parent. Burnout, man. We got to watch out for it. I've been involved in a church. I've been involved at Lighthouse. I'm involved in music ministry. I'm involved in all these other ministries. And sometimes I heard someone say this at a recent a marriage conference, actually, that my wife and I went to. He said, dude, sometimes ministry opportunities are brought around by the devil. Because he wants to keep us from the things that God has for us. And so sometimes just learning when it's a calling from God and when we need to say no. There's been times in the recent years that I need to say no, because when I get home sometimes in the last couple of years with that burnout, these boys, there's times where they were just getting the scraps, the scraps of me. And that's hard, And when you realize that too, it's hard. It's like right here, man, so trying to walk out of that and be the father that God calls us to be the leaders, to be there for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Talk to us about what are some of your favorite books that you enjoy reading, either in the past or most recent.
Okay. I don't remember what the last book I read was. It might be sitting here. It's not. But I'd say in recent years, one of my favorite books that I have read is The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It's just a solid read, especially if you know the story of that man's life. Like, he understood the cost. You almost have to read a little, by the way, if you've heard of that movie and you're considering watching it, you almost have to read a little biography of his life to be able to follow that movie, because it skips some large chunks of his life for good reason. It'd be a 10-hour movie if it didn't. But anyways, sorry, sidebar there. It was such a great book about, one of my favorite chapters is he talks about cheap grace versus costly grace. He talks about the kind of theology of grace and why it doesn't work to say, hey, God's going to forgive me. So, I'm just going to go ahead and do what I want to do today because, grace. And I'm going to go to church and be forgiven on Sunday. And that's how this works, right? No, right? Paul even says is it Romans? Well, he says, by no means. This is not how grace works, right? And so it was an excellent book. It goes in then when it talks about that cost of grace. He kind of establishes that early on. Kind of goes from there and talks about the cost of being called to be a disciple of Christ. It's not going to look exactly the same for everyone, especially when we talk about picking up our cross, right? Dying to self every day. Yeah, there's a cost there, right? And so it's a fantastic book, especially if you are considering going into ministry, any kind of ministry field, or if you're in a ministry field. It can really inspire and remind that, hey, there's a cost, but this cost is so well worth it. I know back in the day, I really enjoyed the Narnia books by C.S. Lewis. I enjoy C.S. Lewis in general. I've read a few of his, the fiction and the theology books. Mere Christianity is actually a recent one I've read. There's this author named Shane Pruitt. I'm big, especially in youth ministry, on ministering to current events. I don't want to get too far into this because, I don't know your audience, but things that are being put into kids' heads by mainstream world, I tend to be very outspoken about, especially if I'm talking to children. I want them to know the truth of who they are in Christ. So this Shane Pruitt guy has a couple books. One of them is 9 Common Lies in the Church or something like that. It's a long title, but that kind of wraps it up. It's kind of, he's just making sure that we are careful to understand the context of verses, right? And not believe what we want them to mean versus what they actually mean. An example that I use for that all the time, this isn't one in his book, but one I personally use is Philippians 4:12, for I can do all these things through Christ who gives me strength. And you hear people all the time use that for like motivational, like, man, I could go be an astronaut tomorrow because Jesus, right? And I'm just like, well, God gives you gifts and abilities for what he's calling you to. And that verse, actually, when you read it in context, right before that verse, he lists all these things: trials, persecution, hardships, right? And when you look at the Greek translation, the Greek wording of that verse, it's actually almost more literally translated, I can do all these things through Christ who gives me strength. So Paul is alluding to the things right before that verse, saying, Christ is going to give me the strength to endure whatever life throws at me, not hey, I'm going to lift up a car over my head because I'm strong now. Because, what he's calling us to do, these miraculous things, are usually going to be for his kingdom, his purposes, not my own, right? So contextualizing, I like books that talk about that. I'll end that spiel there.
Jonathan, man, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. The times we got to do ministry together in the past, whether music or college ministry, man, it's been so much fun. And so I so appreciate you and your friendship. Thank you. Truly.
Yeah, thank you too. Every ministry you and I have done together, it's a partnership. I'd say you have inspired me just as much as you say I've inspired you. No, but the joking wording aside, that's real. Yeah, appreciate you and look forward to if someday we get to do more ministry together.
That's right, man. Hey, thank you so much, Jonathan, for hopping on the podcast. I appreciate your friendship. And thanks again for being such a great friend. For those listening and watching, thank you for tuning into the podcast. Have a great day. We out.